The door slammed shut behind me with a final, cruel thud. My own son, Jake, had just kicked me out of the house I had helped him buy. The cold night air bit into my skin as I stood on the porch, clutching the single bag he had thrown at me. Inside were just a few old clothes, a toothbrush, and a worn-out photo of my late husband. "You lost your job, Mom. You're useless now," Jake had said, his voice colder than the winter wind. "I can't have you dragging me down." I stood there, stunned, my heart pounding in my chest. How had it come to this? Just a month ago, I was the one paying his bills, fixing his mistakes, being his mother. Now, because I lost my job at the hospital, I was nothing but a burden to him. But what Jake didn't know was this: I wasn't broke. Not even close. Hidden away in a secret account was a fortune. Not millions, but enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. A secret I had kept for years, just in case life ever turned against me. And now, as I stood there in the dark, homeless and betrayed, I realized maybe it was time to use it. But not yet. First, I needed to see just how far my son's cruelty would go. 6 months earlier, life had been normal. I worked as a nurse at the city hospital, just like I had for the past 25 years. The job was exhausting, but I loved helping people. I had raised Jake on my own after his father passed away when he was just 8. I did everything for him. Worked night shifts to pay for his college, helped him buy his first car, even bailed him out when he got into trouble. I thought we were close. Then the hospital downsized. "Sorry, Linda," my supervisor had said, avoiding my eyes. "We have to let go of the older staff first." Just like that, 25 years of dedication meant nothing. I was 57, too old to easily find another nursing job, too young to retire. But I wasn't worried, not at first. I had savings. And Jake had a good job in tech now. He could help me until I figured things out. Or so I thought. The moment I told him I lost my job, his face changed. "Seriously, Mom?" he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "You expect me to support you now?" I blinked back tears. "Jake, I've always been there for you. I just need some time." "Time?" He laughed harshly. "Mom, I've got my own life. My own expenses. I can't be responsible for you." The words cut deep, but I told myself he was just stressed. Maybe he didn't mean it. But over the next few weeks, things got worse. He started making comments, little jabs about how I should have planned better, how I should have married again for financial security. Then, he began treating me like an unwanted guest in what used to be our home. "Don't use the AC too much," he'd snap. "The electric bill is insane. Can you stop buying groceries? I like ordering takeout." Every day, the house that used to be full of love felt emptier, even though all our furniture was still there. Then came the final blow. One evening, I returned from another failed job interview to find my belongings stuffed into garbage bags by the front door. Jake stood there, phone in hand, not even looking at me. "You've got until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live," he said coldly. My hands shook. "Jake, I'm your mother." "And this is my house," he replied. "I can't afford freeloaders." Freeloaders. That's what 29 years of motherhood amounted to. I begged. I reminded him of all the sacrifices I'd made. But his mind was made up. 1 week later, he changed the locks while I was out looking for work. When I came back, my bags were on the porch. That first night homeless was the longest of my life. I wandered the streets for hours, my mind racing. I had enough money in my secret account to rent a luxury apartment, even buy a small condo if I wanted. But something inside me refused to touch it. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the need to understand how my son could do this. I ended up at a women's shelter, a cramped space with stained mattresses and the constant sound of crying. A young woman with tired eyes handed me a thin blanket. "First time?" she asked knowingly. I just nodded, unable to speak. As I lay on the lumpy cot, listening to strangers breathing around me, one thought kept circling my mind. Jake thought he was so clever. He thought he'd gotten rid of me. But little did he know the game was just beginning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of arguing. 2 women were fighting over the last breakfast tray. A staff member intervened, but the damage was done. The tense atmosphere reminded me this wasn't just some bad dream. Stepping outside, the morning sun felt mocking in its cheerfulness. I had no plan, no direction. But for the first time in months, I felt clear-headed. As I passed a trendy brunch spot, the smell of pancakes made my empty stomach ache. Then I saw him. Jake. Sitting at a window table, laughing with friends, eating a stack of pancakes that probably cost more than I'd spent on food all week. He looked relaxed. Happy. Like he hadn't just made his mother homeless. My fingers curled into fists. That's when I decided. If Jake wanted to play this heartless game, I'd play it better. But first I needed to survive this new reality. And survival was going to teach me things I never expected. By afternoon, hunger gnawed at me relentlessly. I counted my remaining cash, just enough for a cheap sandwich. Then I saw her. An elderly woman struggling to carry groceries up shelter steps. Her hands shook with effort, a bag threatening to spill. Without thinking, I rushed over. "Let me help," I said, taking some bags. She looked up, surprised. "Bless you, dear." Her name was Ethel. She'd been living in her car until it got repossessed. "My son said I could stay with him," she told me as we put away her groceries in the shelter's tiny shared fridge. Lasted 2 weeks before his wife gave me the boot. We sat together on her bunk, sharing my sandwich. "Funny how quick they forget who wiped their butts and paid their tuition," Ethel said with a sad chuckle. Her words stuck with me. Maybe this was happening for a reason, to open my eyes. But just as I started feeling this strange sense of purpose, reality intruded again. A shelter worker tapped my shoulder. "New rule. Only overnight guests can stay during the day. You'll have to leave until evening." Ethel squeezed my hand. "Go to the library, dear. It's warm there." As I walked out, I glanced back at the shelter and saw the worker watching me with pity. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming my power. And I knew exactly where to start. That night, lying awake on the thin mattress, I made my decision. Jake thought he was so smart. Thought he held all the cards. But I had something he didn't. A mother's wisdom. And one thing I knew for sure. The best revenge is living well. Tomorrow my new life would begin. And Jake? He wouldn't see it coming. The morning sun burned my eyes as I stepped out of the shelter, my back aching from the thin mattress. I barely slept, my mind racing with plans and painful memories. But today was different. Today, I would take my first step toward a new life, one where my son would regret ever turning his back on me. I walked to the public library, the only place I could think of where I could sit undisturbed. The librarian, a kind-faced woman with silver hair, gave me a small smile as I entered. I found a quiet corner and pulled out the only valuable thing I still had, a small black notebook where I'd written down all my account information years ago, back when I still distrusted banks. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. There it was, account number, routing number, the name of a small credit union in another state. $287,000. Not a fortune by most standards, but more than enough to start over. I took a deep breath. I could walk into any bank right now, access these funds, and rent a nice apartment. But something stopped me. Jake needed to learn a lesson. And I needed to understand, was I the only mother treated this way? The library computers were all taken, so I waited patiently, watching people come and go. A young mother struggled with a toddler while trying to research preschools. An elderly man squinted at the screen, typing with one finger. And then there was me, a well-dressed woman who looked like she should be having brunch, not waiting for free internet access. When my turn finally came, I Googled elderly parents abandoned by children. The results shocked me. Page after page of stories just like mine. Adult children evicting parents. Nursing home bills left unpaid. Inheritance-hungry kids pressuring parents to sign over property. My hands shook as I clicked on a local news story about a 72-year-old man left at a bus station by his daughter. He wasn't contributing to the household, she told reporters. I minimized the browser quickly when tears blurred my vision. Was this what the world had come to? "Ma'am?" A librarian tapped my shoulder gently. "Your time is up." I nodded and stood, my legs unsteady. The rest of the day passed in a haze as I wandered the city, seeing it with new eyes. The park benches where elderly people sat alone. The dollar store where an old man counted pennies for cat food. The bus stop where a woman my age slept on a suitcase. By evening, I had a plan. Back at the shelter, Ethel waved me over excitedly. Linda, they're looking for kitchen help at the church down the street. Pays $10 an hour and you get a meal. I almost refused. I didn't need the money. But then I remembered my purpose. Thank you, Ethel. I'll go first thing tomorrow. That night, as women whispered their stories in the dark, I listened closely. My son took my social security checks. My daughter said I embarrassed her in front of her friends. They put me in a home and never visit. Each story cut deeper than the last. When quiet sobs came from the bunk below me, I climbed down and sat beside a tiny woman named Rose. Without words, I held her hand until she fell asleep. Next morning, I arrived at the small church with its peeling paint and overflowing food bank line. The kitchen supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Doris, looked me up and down. Can you peel potatoes without losing a finger? Yes, ma'am. Ever served food to a crowd? I was a nurse for 25 years. I can handle crowds. Doris smirked. Welcome aboard. For the next 6 hours, I peeled, chopped, and stirred giant pots of stew. My back ached, my feet swelled, but for the first time in months, I felt useful. As we served lunch to the homeless, I noticed Mayor Johnson doing a photo op at the end of the line. Perfect. When he reached me, I handed him a tray with my brightest smile. So wonderful to see you supporting our community, Mayor. My son voted for you. Flattered, he lingered. Your son has good judgment. And what brings a lovely woman like you here? I lowered my voice. Just helping out since my position at County General was eliminated. Budget cuts, you know. His smile faltered. A former healthcare worker serving meals at a shelter? Bad optics. He took my hand. We should talk. The city always needs experienced nurses for consulting work. Doris raised an eyebrow as the mayor's aide handed me a card. That evening, carrying my leftover stew in a donated Tupperware, I decided to walk past Jake's house, my old house. Through the window, I saw him hosting friends, my good china on the table, laughter spilling out. Then I froze. On the mantel, where my wedding photo used to sit, was a new picture of Jake with a blonde woman. His arm around her possessively. A girlfriend? One he never mentioned to me? As I stood there, the front door opened and Jake stepped out to take out the trash. He saw me immediately. Mom. His face twisted in annoyance. What are you doing here? I held up the container. I brought you some stew. From the shelter kitchen where I work now. He didn't reach for it. You can't just show up here. I lived here for 12 years, Jake. Not anymore. His voice turned cold. Look, if you need money for a bus ticket to Aunt Carol's, I can. I don't need your money. The words tasted bitter. I just wanted to see my son. A woman's voice called from inside. Jake? Everything okay? The blonde appeared in the doorway. Pretty. Young. Expensive clothes. Jake's demeanor changed instantly. Hey, babe. Just dealing with something. He turned back to me, hissing under his breath. Mom, leave. Now. Something inside me snapped. Of course, dear. I said loudly, sweetly. I wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of your girlfriend. Funny though, you never mentioned her when you were kicking me out. The girlfriend's eyes widened. Jake? What's she talking about? Jake's face turned red. Nothing. She's confused. He stepped toward me, his voice a dangerous whisper. If you ever come back here, I'll call the police. I smiled, leaning close. Remember who taught you how to bluff, Jacob. Walking away, my heart pounded, but my steps never faltered. Let him explain that to his girlfriend. Back at the shelter, Ethel took one look at my face and handed me a stolen hotel shampoo bottle. Bathrooms free. Go wash off the day. Under the weak spray of lukewarm water, I finally let the tears come. Not for Jake, for me. For the years wasted believing love was enough. As I dressed in my last clean outfit, Doris burst in. Linda. Mayor's aide called. They want you downtown tomorrow. Some health initiative thing. The other women looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. Maybe if I got a break, they could too. That night, as I lay awake planning, Rose whispered from the bunk below. You gonna take the job? I stared at the water-stained ceiling. Oh, I'm taking much more than that. Because now I had two advantages Jake never saw coming. My nursing skills, and the fact that no one suspects a well-dressed homeless woman. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd meet with the mayor wearing the one good suit I still had stored in a bus station locker. Let Jake enjoy his fancy dinner parties. His mother was just getting started. The bus station locker smelled of stale air and metal as I twisted the key. Inside hung my navy blue and tailor suit, the one I'd worn for important meetings back when I still had a career. I shook it out carefully, relieved to find it unwrinkled. The matching heels still shone. Dressing in the shelter bathroom, I barely recognized myself. The suit transformed me from homeless woman back to Linda Carter, RN. A dab of donated makeup, a quick brush through my hair, and suddenly I looked like someone the mayor would take seriously. Ethel whistled when I emerged. Damn, girl. You clean up nice. I slipped the bus station key into my pocket. Remember, if anyone asks, I'm staying with a friend this week. The morning air felt different as I walked to City Hall, lighter, charged with possibility. The security guard barely glanced at my ID before waving me through. Ms. Carter. A young aide hurried forward. Mayor Johnson is expecting you. Mayor Johnson's office overlooked the city, tall buildings, bustling streets, and beyond them, the neighborhoods where people like Ethel and Rose slept in shelters. He stood as I entered, all politician smiles. Linda. So glad you could come. He gestured to a well-dressed woman beside him. This is Rebecca Cho from the Health Commission. Rebecca's handshake was firm. We're impressed by your credentials. 25 years at County General? I nodded, pushing down the memory of my abrupt termination. Mostly in geriatric care. The mayor leaned forward. Here's the situation. Our senior services are overwhelmed, and the press is hounding me about homeless elders. I need solutions fast. Rebecca slid a folder across the desk. We're proposing a pilot program, temporary housing for homeless seniors paired with job retraining. Would you consult? I opened the folder. The proposed salary made my eyebrows rise. More than I'd made as a nurse. Then I saw the listed funding source, a federal grant for innovative solutions to elder homelessness. My fingers tightened on the papers. This was bigger than revenge. This was purpose. I have conditions, I said. The mayor blinked. Excuse me? I'll need authority to hire staff, including those with lived experience. My mind raced. And I want to launch at St. Mary's Church. Their kitchen already feeds 50 seniors daily. Rebecca and the mayor exchanged glances. A silent negotiation passed between them. Done, the mayor said. I smiled. Then I accept. Stepping out of City Hall 2 hours later, contract signed, I did something reckless. I called Jake. He answered on the fourth ring, voice clipped. Mom? I'm at work. I just met with Mayor Johnson, I said brightly. Remember him? You campaigned for him last election. Silence. Then cautious. What about? They've hired me to lead a new senior initiative. I paused. It pays quite well. Another pause. Too long. I could practically hear him recalculating. That's great, Mom. Maybe we could. Gotta run. First day on the job. I hung up before he could finish, grinning at the sky. Let him chew on that. St. Mary's kitchen buzzed when I walked in. Doris stopped mid-stir, wooden spoon dripping. Well, well. Look who's back in designer duds. I held up my new ID badge. Meet the new director of the Senior Renewal Project. The kitchen staff erupted in cheers. Ethel nearly knocked over her stool. I knew it. I damn well knew it. Over a hastily prepared lunch, I outlined the plan. Convert the churches and used upper floors into temporary housing. Hire shelter residents as staff. Partner with local businesses for job training. Doris wiped her eyes. You're really doing this? I squeezed her hand. We're doing this. That evening, as I organized files in my new makeshift office, a converted Sunday school room, the door burst open.
Jake.
His face was flushed, tie loosened. What the hell, Mom? I didn't look up from my paperwork. You'll have to be more specific. You go from homeless to running some city program overnight? He paced. Do you have any idea how this makes me look?
There
it was. I set down my pen. How does it make you look, Jacob? He stopped, running a hand through his hair. My firm does business with the city. If people find out I kicked your mother out? I stood slowly. Tell me, does Jessica know that story? Or does she think I'm some crazy lady who showed up at your door? His jaw tightened. Stay away from Jessica. Or what? I stepped closer. You'll make me homeless? Too late. For the first time in his life, Jake looked afraid of me.
Good.
I can explain, he started. No need. I gathered my things. The mayor's hosting a press conference tomorrow to announce our program. Front page of the Times, he says. You should come. His face paled. You wouldn't. I walked to the door, then turned. Oh, and Jake? Bring Jessica. I'd love to meet her properly. That night, back at the shelter, I spread blueprints across the dining table. Rose peered over my shoulder. Making palace plans, Cinderella? Better. I pointed. 20 private rooms. Counseling center. Even a small clinic. Ethel whistled. And where's Nurse Linda sleeping tonight? Still with us common folk. I folded the plans. Actually, I was hoping you'd all consider being our first residents.
And staff.
The room went quiet. Then Rose started crying. As I comforted her, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text read, Miss Carter, this is Jessica. We need to talk. Alone. I stared at the screen. Game on. The coffee shop was painfully trendy. Exposed brick, succulents in mason jars, and a menu full of oat milk lattes. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the door. My fingers traced the rim of my coffee cup as I rehearsed what to say. Jessica walked in exactly on time, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, designer handbag dangling from her elbow. She spotted me immediately, her expression unreadable as she approached. You're Linda, she said, more statement than question. And you're Jessica. I gestured to the seat across from me. Please. She sat, placing her bag carefully on the empty chair beside her. For a long moment, we just studied each other. Up close, she was younger than I'd thought, mid-20s at most. Her manicured nails tapped nervously against the table. You wanted to talk, I said finally. Jessica took a deep breath. Jake told me everything last night. Well, his version, anyway. I couldn't help but smirk. Let me guess. His poor, unstable mother lost her job and became a burden, so he had no choice but to ask me to leave. Her blue eyes flickered with surprise. That's almost word for word. Leaning back, I stirred my coffee slowly. And what do you think? I think. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I think you should see these. The screen showed a series of text messages between Jake and someone named Tyler. My stomach twisted as I read. Asterisk Jake. Can't wait to get Mom out. Place is worth twice what we paid with her gone. Asterisk. Tyler. She signed the quitclaim yet? Asterisk Jake. Working on it. Once she's desperate enough, she'll hand over her share. Asterisk. The dates were from 2 weeks before I'd lost my job. I handed the phone back, my hand surprisingly steady. Why show me this? Jessica's face crumpled. Because I lost my dad last year. Her voice broke. He got sick, and I spent every day with him until the end. When Jake told me his story, something didn't add up. So I looked through his phone. The irony almost made me laugh. My revenge had come from the last person I expected, Jake's own girlfriend. What happens now? I asked. She wiped her eyes. I broke up with him this morning. But Linda, he's already filed paperwork to take full ownership of the house. My new office at St. Mary's became a war room. Doris manned the phones while Ethel brewed endless pots of strong coffee. Rebecca Cho from the Health Commission turned out to have a law degree and spent hours reviewing my case. It's not good, she admitted, flipping through documents. When you and Jake bought the house together after your husband died, you agreed to joint tenancy with right of survivorship. I frowned. Meaning, if one owner dies, the other gets full ownership automatically. But more importantly, she pointed to a clause. Either party can petition to sever the joint tenancy, converting it to a tenancy in common. Ethel groaned. English, counselor. Rebecca sighed. It means Jake can force a sale of the house and take half the money. The room spun. That house was my last tangible connection to my late husband. We'd picked out the wallpaper together, planted the backyard maple tree when Jake was born. There's more, Rebecca continued. He's claiming you abandoned the property, which strengthens his case. Doris slammed her coffee cup down. Abandoned? She was thrown out. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, a group of seniors were planting flowers in the church garden, part of our new vocational program. The sight steadied me. Options? I asked quietly. Rebecca hesitated. We could fight it, but lawsuits take time and money. Or, she met my eyes. We use your new position as leverage. Mayor Johnson's press conference was perfectly staged, American flags, sympathetic seniors in the background, and a podium draped with a city seal. Reporters filled the first 3 rows, cameras trained forward. I stood off stage, smoothing my suit jacket. The mayor was mid-speech when a hand grabbed my arm.
Jake.
His breath smelled of mint gum and panic. Mom, we need to talk.
Now.
I shook him off. You're interrupting an important civic event, Jacob. Cut the crap, he hissed. Jessica showed you those texts, didn't she? She had no right. Mayor Johnson, a reporter called out. What inspired this sudden focus on elder issues? The mayor beamed. I'll let our new project director answer that. Linda? All eyes turned to me as I stepped into the lights. Jake froze, trapped between retreating and causing a scene. I adjusted the microphone. What inspired us? The realization that every senior citizen is someone's parent, someone's grandparent. That no one should spend their golden years feeling discarded or forgotten. My gaze found Jake's pale face in the crowd, especially not by their own children. The press ate it up. By evening, my face was on the local news. By morning, a hashtag trended. Hashtag treat your parents right. Jake's law firm called an emergency meeting. His photo disappeared from their website. Meanwhile, our shelter-turned residence welcomed its first 12 residents, including Ethel and Rose. The mayor promised additional funding. A national aging advocacy group reached out to partner with us. And then came the email. Asterisk from Jacob Carter. Subject, truce, asterisk. I deleted it unread. 2 days later, as I sorted donations in the church basement, footsteps echoed on the stairs. I turned, expecting Doris. Instead, an elderly man stood there, leaning heavily on a cane. His suit was impeccably tailored, his white hair carefully combed. Miss Carter, he said in a voice like gravel. I'm Charles Whitmore. I believe you know my granddaughter Jessica. I set down the box of clothes I was holding. Mr. Whitmore. He surveyed the basement, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Jessica tells me you're quite the fighter. Survival tends to bring that out in people. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Indeed. He pulled an envelope from his breast pocket. I'd like to make a donation to your cause. And offer some legal assistance regarding your housing situation. I opened the envelope. The check had enough zeros to fund our program for years. The attached business card was for a senior partner at the city's most prestigious law firm. Why? I asked bluntly. Whitmore's gaze softened. Because Jessica's mother, my daughter, died alone in a nursing home after her husband took everything. I won't see that happen to another woman if I can help it. He turned to leave, then paused at the stairs. Oh, and Linda? That son of yours should know. Whitmore Industries owns his firm's building lease. For the first time since Jake kicked me out, I felt the warm glow of real hope. That night, as I lay in my new small but private room at the center, my phone buzzed incessantly.
Jake.
Again and again. Finally, I answered. Mom.
His voice was raw. Please. I'm sorry.
I'll do anything. Outside my window, the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the building, Ethel laughed at something Rose said. The scent of Doris's famous meatloaf still lingered in the halls. Anything? I repeated softly.
Yes.
Just tell me what you want. I smiled into the dark. Good night, Jacob. And hung up. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's as I sipped my coffee, watching the residents shuffle into the dining hall for breakfast. 6 weeks had passed since we'd opened the doors of the Senior Renewal Center, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Ethel, now our head of resident services, was teaching a knitting class. Rose had taken charge of our small library. Even Doris had traded in her soup ladle for an official title, Director of Culinary Operations. My phone buzzed with another message from Jake. The 15th this week. I didn't need to read it to know it was another plea for forgiveness. Charles Whitmore's lawyers had done their job well. Jake's petition to force the sale of our house had been denied, and his law firm had placed him on administrative leave, pending an internal review. Linda? Rebecca poked her head into my office. The TV crew is here for the segment. And you'll never guess who just called. The governor's office wants to discuss statewide expansion. I smoothed my blouse and stood. Let's go make some magic. The local news anchor, a polished woman in her 40s, smiled warmly as the camera lights flicked on. Ms. Carter, your program has become the talk of the state. What inspired this incredible turnaround in your life? I glanced around at our bustling common area. Seniors laughing, painting, even learning computer skills from teenage volunteers. Necessity, I said simply. And the realization that being discarded doesn't mean you're worthless. The anchor leaned in. Rumors suggest your own son was involved in your homelessness. Care to comment? A hush fell over the room. Every resident stopped to listen. I met the camera's lens squarely. This center isn't about my story. It's about giving second chances to everyone. As the crew packed up, a commotion erupted at the entrance. Raised voices. Then Jessica burst through, her usually perfect hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed. Linda, I need your help. She collapsed into a chair, trembling. Jake's gone crazy. He's been calling me nonstop, showing up at my apartment. Last night She swallowed hard. He threatened to release private photos unless I convince you to drop the legal actions. Ethel gasped. Rose muttered a curse. I knelt beside Jessica, taking her icy hands. Are you safe? She nodded shakily. Grandfather put me in a hotel. But Linda, he's not the Jake I thought I knew. Doris appeared with tea. Sugar, that boy was never who he pretended to be. I reached for my phone. We're calling the police. No. Jessica grabbed my wrist. Please. Just talk to him? He might listen to you. The room waited for my response. All right, I said finally, but on my terms. I chose the house, my house, as the meeting place. The maple tree in the backyard had grown tall over the years, its branches now shading the patio where my husband and I used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. Jake arrived looking haggard, his designer shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. Mom. His voice cracked. You came. I didn't offer a hug. Jessica told me what you've been doing. That's criminal, Jake. He slumped onto the patio steps. I know. I panicked. The firm's firing me. My reputation's ruined. I have nothing left. The anger I'd nurtured for months flickered, then dimmed. This broken man wasn't the villain of my story, just a boy who'd lost his way. You have a choice, I said quietly. Continue down this path and lose everything. Or what? He looked up, hope warring with shame. I handed him a brochure for our newest program, Fresh Start, job training for displaced professionals. You could volunteer, earn back some goodwill. His hands shook as he took it. After everything I did? Because of everything you did. I stood, brushing maple leaves from my slacks. The house is going up for sale. Half the proceeds will fund the center. The other half is yours, if you complete 6 months of service with us. Jake's breath hitched. Why would you do that? I touched the tree's rough bark, remembering tiny hands planting it decades ago. Because everyone deserves a chance to grow. 3 months later, on the day the Fresh Start program welcomed its first participants, Jake among them, a federal grant arrived that would allow us to open 2 more centers. At the celebration party, Jessica pulled me aside. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving him what he didn't give you." Charles Whitmore raised his glass across the room in silent toast. Ethel and Doris were teaching Rose how to line dance. And Jake, hesitantly, was showing a newly homeless accountant how to fill out job applications. As the music swelled, I stepped outside onto the church steps. The sunset painted the sky in golds and purples, the same colors as the bruises life had left on my soul. But bruises fade. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we'd do it all again.